Don't stop, we're in luck now. Don't stop, there's so much to be found. You can find paradise. All you have to do is go find the soul. Dragon Soul.
And this is why the karaoke video was never released.
Shut the fuck up, bitch. Shut the door.
Oh, you coming in?
No. He can fuck off. We have no use for him here.
Banished.
Cold-blooded. Absolutely cold-blooded. So, welcome back to...
Sekhie reacts to Dragon Ball, apparently.
Yeah. Or rather, Knick-Knack reacts to Dragon. I tried to make him read the first 3 volumes of the original Dragon Ball manga for this, because the original, the original beginning of, like, the Dragon Ball manga does actually follow the journey to the west, actually, pretty closely. Like, the mountain, the pig demon, all that sort of stuff does actually happen. So, like, you know, it makes sense. Although I think in that analogy, Baby Goku is the Monkey King and Bulma is Xuanzang.
That's pretty much how I've understood it.
Yeah. Which is a little bit of an odd analogy because Bulma is not very monkly or Buddhist or religious or, you know, she's very much a capitalist and we love that about her. But,
I mean, doesn't that describe the philosophy of Dragon Ball anyways? Growing profit will go on as long as you possible with no end.
Maybe the mechanics of the actual series itself.
Well, I can't talk. I'm a Fate fan.
But also, I mean, I'd say maybe not the original, because we're talking about the original Dragon Ball here.
Yeah.
We're talking about, like, Baby Goku, you know, growing up. It makes sense. Anyways.
We're not talking about Dragon Ball.
No, actually not. Even though we definitely should be.
Look, you got slots on off the shelf. You can submit stuff to.
You know, I used Dragon Ball in a presentation about trickster deities for a world mythology class when I included the Monkey King.
Well, that's one of the people we'll be talking about today.
Yeah. Because we're going to be talking about Journey to the West.
Oh, did I not actually open up the page?
No, you did not.
Wonderful job, Knick-Knack.
Anyways, Journey to the West. Which, I mean, are we talking about Journey to the West, or are we talking about the characters in Journey to the West?
We're talking about the characters in Journey to the West, but one of them is the literal main kind of character in Journey to the West, and the most well-known character in Journey to the West.
The 2 main characters, really.
Yeah.
The main character and the most well-known character. Mostly because, you know, in Journey to the West, the first, 6 books detail the story of the Monkey King before it gets into, Xuanzang.
Like, I'm sure we don't need to go over the entirety of Journey to the West, but I had a feeling that you would have tangents here, and probably good to just have the general story open as well.
Probably a little bit. So, much in the vein of when we did Ushiwakamaru, I read Yoshitsune, you know, or like when we did Lady Murasaki, I read The Tale of Genji, and when we did Lady Shikibu, I read The Pillow Book. Journey to the West is a classic of Asian literature. This is one of the 4 classic Chinese novels. I have not read all 4 of them, but I have read Journey to the West. They're a little hard to get a hold of, like, good translations and copies in the U.S., so I've struggled a little bit.
Arguably, Journey to the West is one of the most important pieces of just Asian literature in general. It
really is, and it's funny because it's easier to find the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms, right? Because that's very, very famous, than it is to find the Journey to the West, at least in my experience. And part of that is translation, trust, and then also a lot of versions in the US will be abbreviated like synopses, or they'll have excerpts from the original text and then
it's a similar problem you ran into with, I don't remember if it was Tale of Genji or Heike. One of the 2?
I think, no. It was, I think it was down there somewhere. But, it was, Tale of the Heike. And Yoshitsune. Remember, I struggled to find a copy of Yoshitsune. I found, like, one copy, like, because Yoshitsune, when we talked about Ushiwakamaru, right? Because Yoshitsune is the story of his life. Yoshitsune had only been translated out of Japanese twice, right? Once in 1950 by Stanford and the University of Tokyo, and once in 2000 into Russian. And the Stanford or Stanford or Harvard, I forget, it does not get like reprints very frequently, and it's a very expensive book to buy new because I think it's basically printed to order or something like that, or they hold very few of them because it's not in huge demand. But not Tale of Genji, Journey to the West is easier to get a hold of than that.
It's a little bit more well known than those are in
Exactly. And maybe that's partially because it's kind of a middle place in terms of when it was written. It was the original publication dates around the 1590s, 1592-ish, and then it was translated into English abridged in 1942, but I never want to read the abridged version, so the completed editions were not released until the 70s and 80s. In most cases it's released as like multiple volumes, which is fine, but it's annoying. Like, I hate having to collect multiple volumes of something that should just be one book. Especially like this, because like each book isn't necessarily like each book is not like that. They're like that. Just put them all together and mark them as chapters, like in Le Morte d'Arthur. They're called like book 1, book 2, book 3, but the whole book 1's only like 60 pages long. It's not that long. You don't need to abbreviate and like separate. Anyways, but so like I said, the original publication date for our earliest complete version is the 1590s, and that was published anonymously, although there are earlier copies of the text. The earlier copies of the text are not completed and do not contain the same level of detail. And then, honestly, there's also some of the book had been published as a form of folktale before that, so whether or not it's all part of one book or it was a series of folktales, etc., etc., we're not really sure, especially because we don't actually have a name for the publisher in the 1590s. Like, it was published anonymously. But it is an important book. We do know when it was published, and we do know when the completed version was published, which is nice. It is actually based on real historical events. The Journey to the West is based on the monk Xuanzang, who was a Sui and Tang dynasty monk who went on a journey and traveled because he was Buddhist. And he pissed off the emperor. That's another big thing. He pissed off the emperor, which is a little funny. But I think I heard of Journey to the West when I was much younger because it's very famous. And I think a lot of the reason why it's very famous is because of the Monkey King. Like, of the characters in Journey to the West, Xuanzang is not the most famous in the Western world. It's the Monkey King.
There was a literal movie and video game. I think there's an upcoming video game coming out, and there's a movie that literally came out months ago.
Yeah, but there have been like 15 or 20 movies in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Also, there's several games that have come out in the last decade, as well as things like Dragon Ball, where Goku is literally just the Monkey King. He's got the tail, he's got the cloud, he's got the staff. He is just the Monkey King. He even turns into a giant angry monkey. He is just the Monkey King. There's no buts about it. So, and by the way, if anyone actually wants more of a... Because I'm not going to go over the entire Journey to the West in great detail. I am going to touch on the different parts of it because I think they're important before I get into our main characters. But if you're interested in a pretty good description of them, I've plugged them before in a recent video, but OSP is doing like a part-by-part Journey to the West animatic and retelling. I think it's at like 6 or 7 parts now. It's a little bit long, but it's really interesting, and it's amusing to watch and look at if you don't have a copy of the book or you can't access one very easily.
Every culture has its classic stories. I wonder what ours will be, and I don't want to know.
I don't want to know. I really don't want to know. Because we talked about this with Paul Bunyan. We don't really have a long and illustrious history as... Like, America has a relatively short history. And so we haven't really had the time to create a whole lot of folk tales. We've created a lot of cryptids. We've created kind of like things like Paul Bunyan. But we haven't really had like sort of a mythology created. And you can't just look at Native American mythology and go, oh, that's ours, because it's not.
No, a very different culture.
Yeah, and there are hundreds and thousands of Native American cultures that have very different deities, even if there are some similar ones. Many are different, and there's different connotations. So I also think we're kind of, and maybe this is me being pessimistic, but we aren't really a part of an era that can create folk tales at the moment, because our lives are so documented by social media and the internet and archival matters and governmental records. It's much harder to create these fantastical stories around people because we know everything about people. Do you know what I mean? So we're not really living in an era that's conducive to the creation of new mythos for any country, whether they be young or old, per se.
So, like, the comment section will roast me alive if I don't bring this up. Fate actually makes that same exact argument. It argues that it's actually nearly impossible for modern people to become servants because of that sort of factor of, we just don't, no one's gonna, like, if you were to go and tell, like, Game of Thrones in the past, you might be able to pass it off as some fact that happened far off. Mm-hmm. You can't do that anymore. Because we know pretty much everything we can.
Yeah, and so I think it would take, for there to be mythology and folklore about modern day America, it would take a significant, either such a significant collapse in technological achievement and such a leap forward in history that no one remembered, or like no one could remember or had records of what had happened, and they were just like archaeologists finding bits and piecing them together. Or, you know, oral traditions passed down through apocalyptic events, maybe. Then, maybe, some sort of American folklore could be created. But that would predicate the existence of essentially a technological and societal collapse that left us at a loss for most of our current archival material and internet records, which would be hard to imagine at the moment. Like, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, because it's happened to civilizations long before us, but it's a little bit mind-boggling to think about, which I'm sure other people weren't thinking about that.
So what you're saying is a big solar flare.
Peter Jackson directed a movie. There were these like moving cities, like technology had been lost after like an apocalyptic event. They were like moving.
I know which movie you're talking about.
Yeah, it'd have to be like that. Remember how they were like looking at like the old like cell phone or whatever, and they were like, there was the nuclear event of like 2879 or something, and we know nothing about life before then. It would have to kind of be that. I mean, not to be kind of a downer, but countries don't really have the ability to create mythology and folklore in the modern day, unless they are significantly technologically behind in terms of record keeping and population records and communications. And I mean, that's my opinion. I'm sure there are people who would disagree with me.
I mean, I think you're right. The closest we do have to these sort of like exaggerated or like folktale stories are like the old American West cowboys and like their lies that they would tell.
Yeah, like Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid. And in a way, those are American folklore, and that is like, we did create folklore around these characters, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not really possible anymore in the same way that it has been in centuries past. So, you know, it's not like 700 years ago a book was written and now we only have fragments, but it tells of this great, like, literal monkey deity or something. We don't have that. We can't have that. Not in America. I mean, the earliest you could write and have it be American would be 400 years ago to date, basically. And we're pretty well documented. I mean, I think Roanoke's the biggest mystery of the Americas in terms of, like, historical events, and that's kind of figured out. I mean, there's a lot of debate online about it, but I mean, if you look at the scholarly sources, we have a pretty good kind of idea of what might have happened.
Sorry to like throw you into that tangent a bit, but like you started saying that, I'm like, wait a fucking minute. Fate talks about this. This would be a fun conversation.
it makes sense. Like, I understand why Fate would do it. Like, even like the Preza King, that's pushing it, you know, in my opinion. That's so recent.
Well, Fate always says that the more recent the servant, the weaker they are, because there's less like, ooh, what could have been, or like filling in the blanks imagination-wise.
It's not what it felt like fighting him.
That's because he had Karna on his side.
Fucking Karna. Speaking of, y'all, I did pull Arjuna and Karna in campaign. Or to be more precise, I paid off Vorn so I could game the system and get all the new servants.
Yes, she did.
I literally did. I had enough Saint Courts. I'm just gaming the system at this point. Anyway, so the Journey to the West is split up into a couple of major parts, as detailed here. 4 in particular. The first part, actually, like I said, covers the Monkey King, right? The first 7 books covers the story of the Monkey King. The second set of chapters, 8 through 12, introduces the monk Tang Sanzang, which is what he's called in the book. And that's kind of shows his biography and background to the start of this journey. So the third section, which is the longest, is the actual episodic adventure story where Tang Sanzang is going to the Leian temple to bring back the Buddhist scriptures. Yeah. Scriptures. And in this, he gets companions. The first is Sun WuKong. The second is the pig demon, also known as Zhu Baiji or Zhu Wuneng. Excuse my pronunciation, I don't speak Chinese. The third is the river ogre, Sha Wujing. And the fourth is the white dragon horse, which is the prince. He's a dragon prince, son of the king of the West Sea. And so those are his companions, and they travel with him along the way. He meets each of them, and through whatever exploits in whatever chapter he meets them, he convinces them to join him. And then in the fourth part, it is the return journey to the Tang Empire from India, because they've traveled all the way to India in this time and are now coming back. And each of them get like certain achievements. Sun WuKong and Tang Sanzang achieve Buddhahood. Sha Wujing becomes an Arhat, and the dragon horse is made into a Naga, and Zhu Baiji is turned into like an altar cleanser instead of being just a pig demon anymore at this point. So that's kind of the main organization of the story. It's, you know, Monkey King, our main character Tang Sanzang, the journey to India, and then the return journey from India and what they get out of it. Which means it's really fun to read. Because you're just like, the Monkey King. And then you just skip past all of Tang Sanzang's introduction arcs because they're boring and we don't like him. I'm sure somebody's going to come for me in the comments somewhere over that statement. But the first time I read it, I did kind of just skim his bits because he's kind of boring in comparison to the Monkey King. And that's understandable because the Monkey King is like hundreds of years old and like this deity who has this really fascinating early life. Whereas, you know, Xuanzang is just kind of a Buddhist monk.
We're the monks.
Hey, we're the monks. Ooh. Yeah. So, you know, my opinion, I think the Monkey King's better. But with that being said, I guess we'll talk about Tang Sanzang because that is our actual character.
The actual main character. Ugh.
So I suppose I do have another question about the Fate-isms here. So Tang Sanzang is the character from Journey to the West. Xuanzang is the actual monkeys based on.
Yeah. I caught that in my own prep too.
Okay, so
they're going to combine them into one person, just kind of as a servant. We'll get to that later.
Okay, no, I mean that makes sense. So I guess let's talk about Xuanzang first then, because that makes more sense. So this is the historical character that we're basing this off of. So our records indicate he lived from approximately 602 to 664. And he was born under the name Chen-Hui or Chen-Yi. And he also has a Dharma name, Moksadeva. So he was a 7th century scholar, traveler, translator, and a Buddhist monk. And he's best known for his contributions to Chinese Buddhism through the travelogue of his journey to India between 629 and 645. And his bringing back of over 650 Indian Buddhist texts to China and his translation of some of those texts. He did not actually manage to translate everything he brought back, because he brought back over 1,300 chapters worth of Buddhist scripture, but he did translate about 75 of them, including a lot of the Mahayana scripture.
Wouldn't you love to be well known for traveling to another country, picking out of their bookstore and coming back with all of them and then translating them out for the rest of your life?
Fun fact. The patron saint of archaeology in Christianity, Saint Jerome, besides the fact that he's well known for, kind of leading a free sex cult and having a bunch of women who followed him around and had rooms in his monastery. One of the things he's most famous for historically is his translation of the Bible, which is the one that most modern Bibles are translated off of. Which is pretty funny. Fuck, Luna. Oh. Just gonna... That should help a little. Oh. Yeah, I can smell it helping. Jesus, cat. I mean, you can't tell me your dogs have never made a stank.
I mean, most dogs don't shit in the house, or they're not supposed to. And if they do shit in the house, you usually get it gone pretty quickly.
Well, I'm sorry. I can't exactly take her litter box out right now. Oh, look. There we go. It's fixed. Powerful peach smell. It's a fucking brat. So, Xuanzang was born in what's now Henan province in China. And from what we know of his early life as a child, he was a very studious boy and read a lot of religious books. Much like some of his elder siblings, he became a student at the Jingtu Monastery, and he was ordained as a novice monk at the age of 13. But during this time, because of the fall of the Sui dynasty, which we've talked about before on the channel, he ended up going to the city of Chengdu in Sichuan, where he was made into a full monk about 7 years later at the age of 20. So he traveled through China, right, all in search of books on Buddhism in hopes he would find books that he hadn't already read or hadn't been translated. And eventually he ended up in Chang'an, the capital, under the rule of Taizong of Tang, who was the emperor at the time. Tang was the dynasty that took over after the Sui fell. He, at this point, knew that he wanted to visit India. He knew about other scholars' visits to India. And he personally thought, and this is a little interesting, but he thought that the previous scholars who had went to India had brought back incomplete and misinterpreted Buddhist texts. And as a result, he wanted to go get the original scriptures, bring them back, and then translate them into Chinese. So he wanted the original Sanskrit texts to resolve what he thought of as issues in the reading material that he had available to him. So when he was 27, he began a 17-year, what would become a 17-year journey to India. And this is what put him on the wrong side of the emperor, because at this time there was a national ban imposed by the emperor on travel abroad. So he defied this when he made his way to India through other nations like Khotan and some other famous areas. So while he was traveling, he went through the Nalanda University in India. He studied under famous monks there, and when he departed from India, he had a caravan of over 20 pack horses and thousands of Sanskrit texts. He was actually welcomed back into China by Emperor Taizong, which is interesting. But I can only imagine that this was something that had to do with, kind of almost like publicity and public factor, because he is coming back after undertaking a journey of his own strength to get Buddhist materials and bring them to Buddhist peoples. And so the emperor kind of has no choice but to welcome him back graciously, because he's undertaken something that's essentially for the betterment of the moral of the nation. So it would not have been a good look politically for the emperor to be like, no, you broke the travel bans. Fuck off. We don't want your Buddhist texts. A lot of Buddhists would be very mad. So Taizong allowed him back into China, and he was encouraged to write a travel log of his 17-year journey, detailing where he went, who he met, what he studied under, and kind of the philosophy and Buddhism that he had learned along the way. So he wrote a travel log that was titled The Great Tang Records on the Western Regions. Records. A marriage, which is a really good source for information about his life and about 7th century India and Central Asia. His travel log, however, much like Herodotus and Marco Polo, is a fun mix of first-hand accounts, hearsay, and highly implausible occurrences. Much like Herodotus and his commentary that, when an Egyptian's cat dies, they shave their head for a year. He was traveling and he was writing down what he did, but he was writing down also the rumors that he heard from one person about another person. So often that means that when you're reading the travel log, it's also transmitting to you sort of the opinions people had of their neighbors and things like that. Like, I am from India. This country is my neighbor. Did you know that they eat dogs there? Or something like that. Kind of the sort of rumor mill happening. And then the implausible, he just included things that are like highly implausible. You know what I mean? It's not a bad thing. It just is. This text would then provide the inspiration for the novel Journey to the West, which was written during the Ming Dynasty by WuKong about 9 centuries later. So, significantly longer time after, but that shows that his travel log was well known, well published, and available for people to read, which is pretty interesting. It means that it was in good circulation for 900 years, or at least it came back into popularity 900 years later. Although, for all intents and purposes, in a lot of Asian countries, travelogues became very, very popular, and I think a lot of that is because they're massive populations, and a lot of these people did not travel outside of these countries. So, when your country is the size of all of Europe, you travel out of your country significantly less than someone who's living in Prussia and has to travel if they want to go further than 3 hours from home, technically. It makes a difference in how much your people travel outside of their nation when their nation is that big and diverse. Small nation, lots of outside travel. Big nation, lots of inside travel. It's just kind of how it worked in the ancient world. So obviously we've got the kind of 2 different names going on here. We've got, Tang Sanzang from the Journey to the West, Xuanzang. Most people, if you said one or the other, would probably recognize. Like if I said Tang Xuanzang and mixed them, you'd know who I was talking about. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it would make sense to you. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. He did not come from an impoverished peasant family. His grandfather had been a member of the provincial court and government in where they were during the time of the Eastern Han.
Well, he couldn't have been to have that many opinions on other Buddhist translated works.
No. He definitely would have been. Yeah. According to other biographies of him, he displayed incredible intelligence and honesty and amazing filial piety, which, sure he did. He was a monk. He achieved, Buddhahood. Of course he did. Retroactively, yeah. Do we know if he was actually that filial and perfect? No. And it was kind of a family tradition to be a monk. He was following an older brother into the monastery, and it wasn't a time of great stability in China. So one thing that does stay relatively stable is monasteries. The religion is not changing significantly much between different dynasties at this point in China. There is still Confucianism and Buddhism, and so if you're a Buddhist monk, you're probably sitting pretty secure.
You say that, but while that was true in China, that was not true in Japan during the Oda Nobunaga campaign.
But we're talking about China. We're not talking about Japan and Oda Nobunaga. We're not talking about those interesting events, shall we call them.
Look, monks in temples does not guarantee safety.
But it guarantees more safety than being a peasant, per se, during the same time of civil unrest. Because if you're a peasant, you might get drafted into an army, and then you might have to fight. If you're a monk, unless the person who's fighting is sacking monasteries, in which case a lot of the time you have enough time to get away because you know that they're coming. I mean, it's not exactly Lindisfarne. Kudos to anyone who got that. Because I know Nick Nack didn't.
Nope.
The great sacking of Lindisfarne by the Vikings.
Yeah. My Viking War.
1060, 10 something maybe? I don't know. Something like that, but yeah. So, 17-year travelogue, huh? That's longer than Marco Polo. Which means it's better than Marco Polo. Sorry, that's absolutely fucking ridiculous to statement. Anyways, so the fun thing about his pilgrimage is that we don't the dates found across various accountings of his travel do not agree. There's like a several year difference between, like a 2-year difference between the start date in the different versions of accounts of his records. So, he also didn't write his own travelogue by hand as he was traveling. I may have made it sound like that. He did not. I actually thought I'd throw that in, see if Nick Nack noticed me making it sound like that. But
I didn't even register.
He dictated this to the other monks at the temple in China when he got back after 17 years.
He wouldn't have. He was too busy translating.
He was too busy traveling. He should have written it down himself. But okay, all right. Improper ethnographic research. Go off, King. Absolutely ridiculous. So there are 3 major versions with a lot of variant details based on the ones taught by him. But there are Persian and Turkish records that talks about someone who he says he met who died in 628 CE, which is a year before he said that he begun his travels. So if he had actually begun his travels in 629, he could not have met this person, who according to the Persians and the Turks had died the year before. Therefore, he must have left before this person's death in 627. Don't you just love?
So what you're saying is this guy is an airhead.
Well, I mean, I think this gets into the general idea that, and I don't know how much you've heard about this, but human memory is fallible. The more times you recount something, the more details you will get wrong. The more you think about something, the more you will forget about it, because the human mind will start to fill in gaps and create details where details did not exist. So it's entirely possible that this man just genuinely, at the point where he was reciting these, did not remember. Maybe he remembered the man's name, but he didn't remember that he died, or he didn't know that he died, so he gave a year date that he thought was correct, but maybe it wasn't. Or maybe he wasn't good at math. That's also an option. He's like, oh, let me count on my fingers how many winters have passed since I've been gone. Oh, 30 minus 15? That's definitely 17.
Man was gone 20 years and no one had the heart to tell him.
Yeah. Which, it's a little funny. So, but generally accepted, according to the agreement of the most amount of texts, in around 630, he ended up in the kingdom of Agni, which is in a place called Turpan. Fun fact, Turpan is actually a city you can visit in Tradewind's Caravans, that game that I like playing. That's super basic and requires no brain power. Actually, it does require a good brain for trade.
Well, it's a simulation game.
Yeah.
It's about resource management.
Yep.
That's an entire genre game that requires a lot of brain power.
Yep. As a child, I was terrible at them. So here he was introduced to the king and a bunch of Buddhists who tried to persuade him to stop his journey here and teach them what he knew of Buddhism. But he refused this, and he was sent further on. He observed that the country had many monks, which was interesting to him because there were monks from multiple schools of Buddhism, and he was familiar with the Mahayana Buddhist teachings, and so he believed that this country had stagnated in their teachings because they followed a different version of Buddhism. We talked about this before when we talked about some of the other Indian servants, but there are multiple sort of divisions of Buddhism and multiple different kind of ways you can follow when it comes. So he supposedly went next into the kingdom of Kuchi, and this was not a super large country, but it had a massive amount of monasteries, once again following Hinayana Buddhism, which he did not see as superior to Mahayana. And so, but he did say that they studied the texts in the original Indian language, which is what he wanted to do. This is one of the first implausible stories. He describes a dragon race in the kingdom of Kuchi. He says that the region was created by dragons metamorphosizing into horses who mated and created dragon horses, and then turned into men and mated with women to create dragon men who ran as fast as dragon horses. So you can see where the implausibility in the tales come from.
Maybe he was being a storyteller first there, or he was or he found some wild informants there.
Oh, I went straight to mushrooms. I was like,
straight to drugs.
This man on the good kush. So the next place he went into was Baluka and some other kingdoms near there. So one of the places he visited was the Kagan of the Go-Turks, and then west into Tashkent, which is the capital of modern Uzbekistan. So that tells you kind of how far he's gotten on the map. He continues describing more monasteries, but he also says that there are the Buddha's footprints here, and light emanated from them on fasting days. Here, also, the Sarvastivada school of Hinayana Buddhism was popular, which, I mean, he was Mahayana Buddhist, so there were obviously differences, and he noted that down. He crossed through Samarkand and several other smaller kingdoms and sort of city-states. Presumably, everything here is basically, he's crossing down the Silk Road. He's heading down the Silk Road till he gets to India. So all of these cities he crossed through were based around rivers or lakes, with vast spaces between them, little to no inhabitants, with very little water or grass, which is pretty indicative of following down the Silk Road. There's a lot of sort of desert areas, and you kind of gather around areas where trade occurs, and that's where water exists. So he then crossed into the Pamir mountain range, which links Tian Shan, Karakoram, Kunlun, and the Himalayas. And here he observed that the wind was incredibly cold and violent. He then said that because of that, he knew that ferocious dragons lived there, and troubled travelers who wore reddish-brown clothes.
This man and his dragons.
He really liked dragons. He passed a salty sea and a place that he called the Great Pure Lake, describing these supernatural demons like fish and dragons living in this lake. He really liked dragons. And then he basically just rushes through a bunch more countries in his travelogue before saying that he crosses into Bactra, right, which is another major stop on the Silk Road. He adds that he also adds he's still following the trail of Hinayana Buddhism. So he has still not found Mahayana Buddhist texts, which is pretty notable. I mean, so basically he's traveling through all these areas where there's one prevalent form of Buddhist school, and he's not really of that school, which is interesting. So he finally goes south of Bactra, ends up in a part of modern Afghanistan, so getting very close, and he finds a huge statue of the Buddha carved from the rock in the mountains. Actually, fun fact, this is a real place. The colossal Buddhas carved into the rocks of the Bamiyan region. And I would show you a picture of them, except in 2001, they were bombed and destroyed by the Taliban. So they no longer exist. But we do have, hand-drawn sketch images of what they looked like from before they were destroyed. But such has been the fate of many ancient places in Afghanistan and the surrounding countries. They have been bombed out of existence. So it's not a place you can visit anymore, not really. Although I do believe people do still pilgrimage there to see the remains of it, because you can still see kind of the niche where they were carved out of stone and how big they are. It's just that the facade has been destroyed entirely. So that's sorry, that got a little depressing all of a sudden.
Maybe we should stop bombing other cultures' holy sites, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So he finally, at this point, he finally crossed a mountain range and came into a place where Mahayana Buddhism was popular. And here he says that there were over 6,000 monks, and that there were a ton of other heretical believers who walked around naked wearing nothing but dust. He says that. Heretical non-believers who walked around wearing dust. So, as far as we're aware, this is what is the Kushan Empire, or the kind of the empire. This is the place it would have occupied, because he talks about King Kanishka of Gandhara at this point. And he also mentions stupas built in this area by King Ashoka, who is a famous king in Indian history. So at this point, he's actually made it into India. So he travels through India, through small villages and large cities, and he has a large section in his travelogue about the differences between Hinayana and Mahayana Buddhist communities, but he also says that there are 18 sects that debate with one another and discuss texts with one another and have slightly differing interpretations of Buddhism. So he gets kind of more south into India towards Lampa, Nagahara, and Gandhara, and he sees the stupas there that he mentioned before, the stupas of Ashoka. And here he finds large monasteries filled with glowing rock footprints of the Buddha, tales of dragons and Naga. One stupa says that there's a Buddha's eyeball preserved inside of it, and that it is transparent, which is interesting. And so he kind of goes as south as he's going to go, and then starts heading up north towards Kashmir, and arriving in cities with more holy Buddhist sites. The city he arrives in is the founding place of 5 of the 18 schools that he discussed. One of them being Sarvastivada, which was the particular type of Hinayana Buddhism that he'd been coming across his entire journey. So, and this is where he's kind of talking about Emperor Kanishka and things like that. So he also comes across the memorial of Panini. So in the Varsha country, there's a stone image of Bhima Devi, the wife of Mahasvara, and it's a site of pilgrimage that he visited as well. And just southeast of it is a temple that he says is the birthplace of Rishi Panini, who is the author of the Sabadya Vidya Sastra, which was super important to him because it was a major place for Mahasvara ceremonies to take place. So he's basically following the footprint of Buddhism. Like, he's following it as far as he can, getting as much detail as he can, even though he's kind of describing it a little bit strangely. And so he crosses the Ganges, passes through several other countries, going from place to place. One of the things he makes sure to document is the amount of monasteries and monks per city or region. So, like, he'll be talking about a region and he'll say something like, this region has 300 monasteries containing 7,000 monks currently studying. And it's almost like a measure of how Buddhist these areas are, how many monasteries and monks they have. And he does this for every single country and province that he passes into. And there are a lot of them. There are literally probably over 200 kingdoms that he names, because India is really divided at this time. And the way that the Silk Road works is there is not one power ruling over all of it right now. It's a bunch of little kingdoms and empires ruling over their section of the Silk Road. So he's basically going from like province to province. So after 16 years, he finally starts making his way back to China. And after 16 years, he crosses back onto Chinese soil, and he is greeted with honor by Emperor Taizong of Tang, who tells him that he should be a high civil official. He refuses that, retires to a monastery, and devoted all his energy for the rest of his life into translating Buddhist texts that he had brought back until his death in 664. According to his biography, he returned with over 600 Mahayana and Hinayana texts, 7 statues, and hundreds of relics. And in celebration of his achievement in translating texts, Emperor Gaozhong of Tang ordered the Tang calligrapher Chu Shuiliang and inscriber Wan Wenchao to install stela stones known as the Emperor's Preface to the Sacred Teachings at the giant Wild Goose Pagoda in honor of him and his translations. So he has massive influence over Buddhism in China. I mean, he brought back the majority of texts at this point, and he was very careful and extensive with his translations of them. And one of the things he brought back 3 copies of the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra, which is the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. And that he had with a team of translators who began translating it with him in 660. And one of the things they did was they took all 3 different versions and they cross-referenced them as they were translating to ensure that there was documentation and integrity across all 3 versions. And he wanted to render a complete, unabridged volume faithful to the original 600 chapters of this work. So he has massive influence in Chinese Buddhism. Truly ungodly. So now Tang Sanzang, his character in Journey to the West, is somewhat different in terms of personality and drive. So Tang Sanzang is also a monk. Oh, honey. Baby girl. She just falls over sometimes. Honey. So, his name actually refers to the mission given to him in Journey to the West, because the main story point of Journey to the West is that he is sent to seek Tripitaka, which is the name for the collections of ancient Buddhist scriptures. However, in some English translations, his name is translated as Tripitaka, rather than that being the name of the scriptures. So in some English versions, they will talk about Tripitaka is the monk, and he is the one who is the main character. But it's Tang Sanzang, and he is seeking the Tripitaka, and the Tripitaka is a name for these famous scriptures. And so it's basically the frame story is that he is given a quest by the gods, right? Because he is a reincarnation of Golden Cicada, a disciple of the Buddha. And so he's given the job by Taizong, right, to journey to India and bring back Mahayana scriptures. And the Bodhisattva Guan Yin helps him find 3 companions to go with him along the way who will protect him. And at the end of the way, when he gets all the way back, he is appointed Buddha of the Sandalwood Merit, and he dismisses how to explain this? So when he makes it back, he's given that Buddhist name, right? He's given the Buddhahood, and that breaks the cycle of his reincarnation, because as Golden Cicada, he had dismissed the teachings of the Buddha, even though he was a disciple of the Buddha, and was essentially kind of like not cursed, but cursed to reincarnate a certain amount of times until he eventually reachieved sort of enlightenment. And this is the ending of that saga. So that's basically his role in the story. I mean, he's not the most interesting character, but he's there. He is the reason that the story is happening. He's the unifying character for all the others. Which gets us into the Monkey King, who's my favorite, because I don't think we need to talk about the pig demon.
No, not
or the
today.
dragon god.
Not today.
Yeah, I figured that wasn't on the schedule. I'm sure they'll be added eventually, because they're famous characters in Chinese mythology, and eventually Fate will need to fill out characters and we'll add them in.
Maybe not. I'm gonna be honest here. The Journey to the West based event is like one of the literal least popular events to ever exist.
Why?
Because it was really badly designed.
Oh, like Rome badly designed?
It's talked about in the same breath as people would talk about really bad early FGO content like Septum.
Oh, but it's such an interesting story. That's disappointing. They should redo it. Give us Journey to the West 2.0.
They did. The better version was released in America, and it was only slightly better.
Give us Journey to the West 3.0. Just continually make them better.
Redo the event.
Yeah, so I don't know how important of a servant Sun Wukong is, or if we even have a servant technically for Sun Wukong, but he's my favorite, so we're gonna talk about him. Knick-Knack just gave me a name. Or a look.
Oh, that was his tired.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I've yawned like 5 times. Not for the fault of Sekhie.
So, Sun Wukong, the character, is possessed of many amazing abilities. He has essentially super strength and is able to pick up 2 heaven mountains on his shoulders while running with the speed of a meteor. He travels extremely fast, has vast memorization skills, and as King of the Monkeys, he remembers every monkey ever born, and it is his job and duty to keep track and protect every monkey. He also acquired, during his lifetime, the 72 earthly transformations, which gives him 72 unique, amazing powers, including the ability to transform into just about any animal or object. He's also an incredibly skilled fighter and has defeated, in his stories, some of the best warriors of heaven. His hair has magical properties, and he's capable of making copies of himself and transforming into weapons, animals, and other things. He's also got weather manipulation magic.
I wonder how many shonen protagonists are based off of him.
Well, Goku. I'm sure there are many, many more. You know how like when we talk about like the prototype for like Western hero stories being the Epic of Gilgamesh, Sun Wukong and the Journey to the West is that for Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah. If every American hero's journey story is just a retelling of Gilgamesh, every Chinese like episodic adventure story is a retelling of the Journey to the West with Sun Wukong. It really is. So, all right. According to the Journey of the West, chapters 1 to 7, so he is born from a magical stone that exists on top of the mountain of Flower Fruit Mountain. So it's on top of Flower Fruit Mountain. This stone isn't a normal stone, though, because it has the both yang and yin energy, negative and positive, and is able to therefore produce living beings without help. The stone itself actually develops a magic womb, which bursts open one day, creating a stone egg that is about the size of a ball. And when the wind blows into the egg, it turns into a stone monkey that is capable of crawling and walking. So, as his eyes move, they cast 2 beams of golden light to the Jade Palace, which startles the Jade Emperor. When he sees this light, he orders his men to investigate, and they report about the stone monkey, and that the light is dying down as he eats and drinks. So the Jade Emperor doesn't believe this to be anything out of the ordinary. However, this monkey on the mountain joins a group of wild monkeys, and after playing, they go to bathe in the stream. And one day, they decide to seek the source of the stream by climbing up the mountain to the waterfall. And the monkeys say that whoever goes through the waterfall and finds the source and comes out will be their king. So the stone monkey volunteers, jumps into the waterfall. He finds a large iron bridge and persuades the other monkeys to jump in, and they make it their home. He then reminds them of their declaration that whoever did this would be the king, and he calls himself the handsome monkey king after taking the throne. This doesn't last a super long time, because what happens is that one of the older monkeys in this group he joined dies, and he becomes very upset by this. So he strikes out in search of someone to teach him how to defeat death. So he comes ashore, and humans see him, and because of his ape-like appearance, they flee from him. So he finds clothes and continues in foot, hidden by a hood, and heads into a forest where he meets a woodcutter. And the woodcutter tells him that he's singing a song taught to him by an immortal who lives in the forest. So he knows at this point that there's an immortal in the forest, and they can teach him how to achieve immortality so that he won't have to lose his friends again. So He ends up with a martial artist named Puti Zushi, who initially refuses to teach him, but he literally refuses to leave and sits outside this man's house for months and months. And Puti is so impressed by his persistence that he finally allows him to be his student and teaches him advanced Taoist ways, including the way of immortality, which he tells him it is his destiny to know. However, he says that Sun Wukong should never show this off because others might ask him to teach him, and if he teaches them, they may cause trouble, but if he doesn't teach them, they will resent him. So he forbids Sun Wukong from ever telling that it was him who taught, and the Monkey King promises never to reveal this. But he also realizes that the years he spent learning this way had taken place in a compressed time trance. And so whenever people ask him about where he learned his powers, he tells them that he learned it in his dreams. Because for all of his various faults, he is loyal to those that he values. So after he returns to his monkeys, he...
I know that look. That's a look of your notes were like a bit jumbled. You're like, what the fuck did I write?
No, actually, I just got like 3 text messages in a row.
Ah.
And I'm just like, what the fuck?
Something up?
I don't know. No one's responding, so. So once he's returned to his fellow monkeys, he learns that there's a demon king that is kidnapping the monkeys of the Flower Fruit Mountain to use as slaves. And in a fit of rage, he kills the demon and his minions and saves the kidnapped monkeys. He also brings the entirety of weapons of a nearby country for his subjects. But even though he's able to find weapons for all of his monkey subjects, he can't really find a weapon for himself. So he hears that the Dragon King possesses many treasures and weapons, so he goes to the ocean and finds the palace of the Dragon King. At the entrance, he asks for an introduction, and the Dragon King tells his guard to turn him away. But he barges in anyways, insisting that he must be confused to turn away a fellow king like himself. And so he introduces himself and asks the Dragon King to give him a weapon. But realizing that, based on him barging in, that he himself is quite strong, the Monkey King is not exactly a pushover, the Dragon King says, okay, bring out weapons and he'll test them, right? So he tests weapon after weapon and he can't find anything. So what he does is he takes a pillar from the palace, and one of the things that is meant to stabilize the 4 seas, right? This thing is massive. And he lifts it and turns it into like a staff-like weapon, right? A golden staff-like weapon. It weighs over almost 8,000 kilos, right? According to the way that the story describes it. And the Monkey King's able to shrink it down to the size of a needle or make it as big as he needs to be. And the Dragon King is like, what the fuck? I don't want to fuck with him. So he sends out calls to all the other Dragon Kings, and he tells them that they need to give assistance to Sun Wukong, because otherwise he's gonna, be real mad. So the other kings show up, and one gives him a golden chainmail shirt, a phoenix feather cap, cloud walking boots. And so these are kind of the treasures of the Dragon King that were given to Sun Wukong. And so he thanks the Dragon King and leaves happily. So he returns to Flower Fruit Mountain, and he shows his monkey tribe his new weapon. And he draws the attention of other beastly sort of kings and demons who want to ally with him because he's a powerful man now. And so he makes a brotherhood called the Seven Sages with the Bull Demon King, the Saurian Demon King, the Singlehorn Demon King, the Rock Demon King, the Lion Spirit King, the Macaque Spirit King, and the Snub-Nosed Monkey Spirit King, which were all nearby. And so, however, he was then sentenced to death by the Jade Emperor for extorting the Dragon Kings. Because you shouldn't do that. And then he defies Hell's attempt to collect his soul, wiping his name out of the Book of Life and Death, making it impossible to kill him. So he achieves him. So he now has immortality 2 ways, redundantly. He has the Taoist way of immortality, and he has erased his name from the Book of Life and Death. The Dragon Kings report him again to the Jade Emperor, and they throw literally everything at him to try to get him to die, and it does not work. Not even a little. So, but the Jade Emperor is still hopeful, right? He thinks that if he invites the Monkey King to heaven and gives him a rank in the kingdom of heaven, he will kind of quiet down and be less disruptive. So he invites the Monkey King to heaven, and he's named the Protector of Horses, which is a very, very fancy title for stable boy, the lowest job in the entire heavenly palace. When he discovers this, he sets all the cloud horses free from the stable, returns to his own kingdom, and proclaims himself the great sage, heaven's equal. The heavens reluctantly have to recognize his self-proclaimed title after Goldstar advises the Jade Emperor against rushing into military action against him, and tells the Emperor to appease him for now, but kind of treat him like a pet on call, invite him back to keep him from causing trouble on Earth by giving him an even more fanciful title. So they invite him back, and Sun Wukong thinks that this is a trap, but he still goes. So Goldstar then tells Sun Wukong that he has been granted the position Guardian of the Heavenly Peach Garden. And Sun Wukong loves peaches. Mood, Sun Wukong. I get it. I also fucking love peaches. And so he accepts. And when 7 heavenly maidens are sent to get peaches for the royal banquet, Sun Wukong discovers that every important god and goddess has been invited to this banquet except for him. They're really doing a bad job at placating him.
The more you talk about Sun Wukong, the more I'm just thinking Anakin fucking Skywalker.
So he tells the maidens that he is the great sage equal of heaven, and they laugh in his face, telling him that everyone in heaven knows he's just a lowly immortal who tends the peach garden. But during the preparations for this royal banquet, he sneaks in because he wants to taste the fine food and drink. But he gets a little bit tipsy, and he roams around heaven. And while the gods and goddesses are on the way to the banquet, he reaches the really high levels that heaven leaves unguarded because they're only supposed to be accessed by deities of the highest and purest spiritual power. When he realizes that he is at the top of the heavenly palace, he steals and eats Lao Tzu's pills of immortality and Shi Wangmu's peaches of immortality, taking the remainder of the Emperor's royal wine and escaping back to Flower Fruit Mountain in preparation for his rebellion. At this point, he is now immortal 4 times over. He has learned the way of immortality. He has erased his name from the Book of Life and Death. He has eaten the pills of immortality, and he has eaten the peaches of immortality. And he stole all the Emperor's wine. Legend. Absolute legend. And you wonder why I like him more than Tang Sanzang. So the Jade Emperor is like, nah, fuck off. He's going down. Like, we are going to take him down. I don't care what you're counseling me.
We're killing him one immortality at a time.
Literally. We are going to murder him. So the Monkey King then single-handedly defeats Heaven's army of 100,000 celestial warriors, all 28 constellations, T.H.E, and all 4 heavenly kings.
Hey, there's a name that'll come up again one day.
T.H.E. However, then Guan Yin, who we talked about earlier in relation to Tang Xuanzang, because Guan Yin's the one who finds his companions for him and tells him who he has to collect, she and her disciple Muja, or Moksha, arrive. Now, Guan Yin sends Muja to inspect the situation and fight Sun Wukong, but he is defeated. And so Guan Yin then suggests that Erlang Shen, the Jade Emperor's nephew, should fight WuKong. They are evenly matched until both turn into terrifying large demonic figures. But the problem is, when this happens, WuKong scares his own monkey army away, and he is so disheartened by the fact that his monkey friends are afraid of him that he turns into a fish to run away. And, much like a Celtic story that we've talked about before, he and Erlang keep turning into different shapes in the hopes that one can either beat or escape from the other. And during this time, Lao Tzu throws his diamond ring at WuKong from behind, which knocks him senseless, enabling Erlang to bind him up. He is then locked into the 8-way trigram crucible for 49 days in order to be... So, okay, let's talk about this here. So, they lock him into, like, a wine stewing vat for 49 days in the hopes that they will distill the immortality out of him and turn it back into Lao Tzu's pills of longevity so that he will no longer be immortal by that standard. Like, the flames of this fire are so hot that it's supposed to be able to rival the power of the Buddha himself. But when the cauldron is opened 49 days later, he just jumps out because he hid in the corner marked by the wind where there was less fire. And the heat, turns out the heat from the fires just made him stronger than ever before and gave him a new ability. And now he can recognize evil with his fiery eyes and golden purple pupils, or Huoyan Jinjing. He then proceeds to absolutely destroy the Crucible and confront the Jade Emperor and his senior advisors in the palace, in person. So, the Jade Emperor then appeals to the Buddha, who comes from the west in person. And he listens to Sun Wukong, who makes the case that he should be the new Jade Emperor. And the Buddha makes a bet with him. He says, "You can be the Jade Emperor if you can escape from my palm." So the Monkey King accepts. He's super smug about this. He flies all the way to the edge of the universe and finds nothing but 5 towering pillars. He believes he's reached the end of all existence, and to prove that he's made it there, he marks the pillar, declaring himself the great sage equal to heaven, and urinates on the middle pillar. He then leaps back and returns to the Buddha's palm, claiming his victory, and is very surprised to be told that the 5 pillars are the fingers of the Buddha's hand, meaning he did not escape the Buddha's palm, because the entire universe is in the palm of Buddha's hand. He then turns his hand into a mountain of rocks, hurtling WuKong back down to Earth. And before he can lift the mountain off of him, he seals him there using the Om Mani Padme Hum, a paper talisman and mantra. And he remains imprisoned there for 500 years, just fed by 2 earth spirits, until Sanzang comes along and gets him out in exchange for helping him along with his pilgrimage. Fun fact, the only reason that he's forced to listen to Sanzang is because Guan Yin, who was part of, his original downfall, right? Guan Yin gives Sanzang a gift from the Buddha, a magic circlet that they trick the Monkey King into putting on, and once on, it can never be removed. So when Sanzang chants a certain phrase, it will tighten and cause an unbearable headache.
Oh, look, 8 o'clock.
Guan Yin gives the Monkey King 3 hairs, only to be used under special emergencies, and under the supervision of Sanzang, he is then allowed to travel to the west. Interestingly enough, there's another manga that we can touch on now, manga and anime based on this. You ever heard of Inuyasha?
Yes.
The subjugation beads, it's very similar to the circlet used on the Monkey King.
I wonder if that was based off of it or not.
It likely was. Anyways, I'm not going to go into any more detail. So at this point, it is yours to take over because I'm not going to describe the entirety of his journey to the West travels. Because I don't believe I need to.
Good. This could already be a video in and of itself. Look at that timer.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay. Look, it was all necessary.
So I guess since you are not familiar with the servant from the campaign, what class do you think this servant is? We're starting with Sanzang.
We're starting with Sanzang. Caster. Do I get to click in?
Yep. Scroll up.
What the fuck?
Go ahead and click into the next page for
that
all
is
the
a
designs.
woman.
Yep.
That is a woman. Is it a caster at least?
Yes.
Okay. At least I'm right somewhere. Aw, so cute. They even look like somewhat like the Inuyasha subjugation beads. Oh, and that's a Buddhist symbol, the staff with the rings.
So yes, Sanzang in Fate is gender bend.
Hey look, Tripitaka.
I don't have much to say on this gender bend. This is just one of those ones where it's like, this is just how it is. I might get some elements of the story wrong since I never played the original event she was in, but I'll do my best to explain her.
How dare you?
Sanzang is not normally summonable. She has reached a divine-like status and has no earthly desires, so in a Holy Grail war, Her summoning is impossible, and even beyond that, she will not usually step in and allow herself to be summoned as she is in life.
Yeah, because she was granted Buddhahood. She was released from her cycle of he was released from his cycle of reincarnations after, the golden cicada was punished appropriately.
I will mention, just because you slipped on that, because I'm gonna, blow your mind here. I get most of my information on worldwide literature and mythology through Fate these days. So I knew this was a gender bend, but it takes all my power when I was telling you about which server you're doing next, not to accidentally say she whenever referring to Sanzang.
It's like me with poor Shiro, Amakusa Shiro.
Mm-hmm.
For 3 weeks, y'all, I kept referring to Amakusa Shiro as a female because for some reason the name just made me think female.
It could be that Shiro is commonly used as a female name in Japanese as well.
It might be, yeah.
But basically, the story with her goes that at one point, Chaldea specifically tries to summon her due to how big of a name she is.
Mm-hmm.
And she, as usual, rejects this summoning, believing there's no purpose to returning to Earth to help it after abandoning all of her earthly desires. The incineration of humanity to her was just a ripple in the world's existence. The OG Buddha had one look at her reasoning and said, no, nah. You're being selfish here, and you can absolutely do better. So he yeeted her into a custom-made singularity and drew Chaldea in. There he wiped her memory, making her believe she was still right in the middle of her journey. She meets the protagonist there, and slowly, during a recreation of her journey, using servants to fill out all of the spots of the protagonist, I think being Sun Wukong.
Yeah.
She slowly comes to realize her folly, recognizing that she has lost the Buddha's guidance. She would not gain it again after her event, but would return in the Camelot singularity, once again without her memories, where she would sacrifice herself, finally regaining what she lost.
Interesting.
She appears a few more times after that in minor roles, but that is kind of the extent of her arc at this point in FGO.
Okay. So, relationships then. The enlightened ones. There is always the Shakyamuni Buddha's divine protection, therefore everything's all right. Sun Wukong. If you have time to come here, first add to your body a resourceful ability to find yourself a bride. Kiara-san, huh? Accept, don't accept, don't accept. Tawara Tota. It's Tota. Hey, wait. It's not good if you are not training diligently. Oh, Inshan-kun. Would you like a sermon or a match today? Either way, let's begin your training. Hozuin Inshan. Okay. Neja. What lies? You are not Prince Neja. I wonder if Heavenly King Li Jing is in good health. Well, WuKong is not here. I'm telling you the truth. By some chance, did you lose to WuKong? You never change. You're cute. Neja did lose to WuKong. So Neja and Kato Danzo. Where are you, Neja? Oh, there you are. You're bored, right? Then as a special treat, I'll give you a tour of the place. I have a feeling you and Danzo would get along really well. Hey, why are you running away? Wait! Ooh, Li Xuan. I just got to play with him in campaign. You handle an excellent spear. I wonder if you can teach me your moves. You want me to teach you? Gone? Ooh, Wu Zetian. I think I may have seen this girl in the past. Or not. There's a resemblance. I think. It's Asterios-kun. Yep. Good boy. Good boy. Asterios is goodest boy. Okay.
So Sanzang here fights using her bare hands as well as weapons using the weapons of her, and she uses the weapons of her disciples.
Like the Kakara stuff?
Yeah. In some ways, those disciples joined her to protect her, even if they're not there physically. Mm-hmm. She otherwise fights using Buddhist sutras as her primary qualification as a caster.
Okay. So I see territory creation, item construction, divinity, right? So high-speed sutra chanting, right? Which makes sense. Bewitching rosy cheeks and natural beauty that... Oh, yeah. So that's actually kind of funny because, there is the joke that, people sometimes make about the Journey to West, but, Sanzang, literally attracts mischief and demons. Because of his journey and, what he's doing, he's almost like a danger magnet. So that actually makes a lot of sense. Teachings of Tripitaka. So the way of Tripitaka master, because the Buddhist scriptures were the treasury of Xuanzang. So being a Tripitaka
I
master.
can't remember if my brother and I made it so that if Sanzang was in the party, it increased your encounter rate. I should totally do that if that's not already a thing.
It really should. So Noble Phantasms. The 5 Elements Mountain Buddha Palm is the story I told you, the Buddha Palm. And then Vyakarana, Buddha of the Glorious Sandalwood. So that's a reference to his ascension to Buddhahood, because he was the glorious sandalwood Buddha, because sandalwood has certain implications.
So the way each of these NPs are, so the Buddha of the Glorious Sandalwood, I'm not going to try pronouncing the other part of that name. This is a defensive noble phantasm and is the protection of the Buddha. It wraps around Sanzang's entire body, protecting her and healing her. It is, however, also not usually used defensively. It's used as a way of making her body capable of repelling anything. But it's only temporary, and when it fades, she will as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not a defensive thing. It's I'm going to make sure nothing can touch me, and I can move things as I please, but that doesn't mean that she's... Mm-hmm. It's not like a permanent, like, long-lasting thing.
Okay. And then 5 Elements Mountain?
Mountain Buddha Palm. This is Sanzang borrowing the power of the Buddha into her hands, which she then uses to strike the target. Nice. She has a stronger version of that that's not listed here, called the Final Buddha Palm. This is just her borrowing even more power, but that amount of power is an actual suicide attack, and is, but it makes the attack just considerably more powerful.
I do see, interestingly enough, that in the Chinese server, she's named Pilgrim to the West because of depiction of historical figures.
Yeah.
But in Taiwan gets her original name, and I did see. So this is the person who did... So the person who designed her also did Frankenstein. Okay. Interesting. So not a whole lot of servants, but Frankenstein's an interesting one, because I've seen Frankenstein. All right, is this...
That's the NP.
Is it the only one?
Yep. I thought there was an arcade, but I was wrong.
Oh. Older servant?
Yep.
Like early FGO or like middle FGO and never revisited?
Early FGO, but this should be a revisited version.
Oh. Ah, there's the staff of Sun WuKong. And I'm pretty sure those are the weapons of her other party members. Mm-hmm. The Pigsy and Baiji. Jesus. Love that. Love that. That looks really fun.
So... I guess might as well move on here. Next we have Sun WuKong. So this is the gag version of Sun WuKong, by the way.
Okay.
The original Sun WuKong in Type Moon was a gag character in Koha Ace. I don't even mean a Koha Ace character like the Gouda Kuda crew. No, I mean he was a literal one-off joke that was thrown aside within the same manga and never used again.
I do like that there's also a depiction of him as a woman.
So this Sun WuKong shows the ability to jump between any gender at will and has a reality marble that functions like the Tsubame Gaishi, which is unintentionally good timing.
I literally love him. I love him so much. And her. I love them so much.
We can assume Koha Ace would go crazy with them, but that we don't have this version of the character has not been expanded upon since the initial gag.
Well, he's the great sage equal to heaven, so...
But we do have... Sun WuKong was revisited in the main Fate timeline recently. So Sun WuKong...
Oh.
We know bits and pieces of him from various Fate works. Mm-hmm. Thanks to a CE costume, we kind of know... What?
Son Goku. That is literally...
I wonder if it's a translation thing.
Probably.
So, thanks to a CE costume, we know what he wears, and we know at least one of his noble phantasms, which is the Ruyi.
I can look at it in a second.
Okay.
If you... Ruyi Jingu Bang.
This noble phantasm allows him to bend the air around himself and use his weapon to pin an opponent in place with it.
Like I said, the manipulation of the elements that he has and the whole staff thing. I like that his alternate name is Handsome Monkey King of the Waterfall. the name he chose for himself.
I will mention, so the reason why we have like this sort of artistic depiction of Sun Wukong here is because he will play an important role in the adventures of Lord Elmaway II, with his powers being used by one of the major characters in a specific arc in that series.
Ooh.
I've looked into it a little, and we'll kind of just end it here since I think inevitably we will be reading this on the channel.
Ooh, can I look at this?
Yep. So this is the CE I was talking about, where you get to see the main protagonist, the female protagonist dressed up as Sun Wukong.
Oh yeah, because there's the circlet and the
Yep.
staff. And look, Pigsy. And the other one.
And there's the male protagonist dressed as Sun Wukong.
Oh yeah.
With Sanzang.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, that was
Short.
short and sweet.
A tease.
Yeah. Wasn't much, but it was fun.
1 hour of
I guess,
CE time.
yeah, it's CE time. Baseball. Oh, goodness. Look at her. She's so happy with her big hat. Yeah, the kakara. Monk's spade and rake. Buddha cameo. Oh, cool. Alright. Expression sheets.
Early FGO, not a lot of expressions.
Yeah, it's still cute. Oh, fair. Okay, let's get that here first. No, so cute. Anyways, okay. So, it's from an event.
Oh yeah, it's the car racing event. She literally rides a horse and carriage.
Okay, so we have a full CE here.
Yep.
Flower Fruit Mountain and the waterfall. Anyone? Okay, I don't think she. No extra art besides that, but
Feet pick.
I'm ignoring that.
You shouldn't. This will be on the test.
Shut the fuck up. A lot of C's for her, which I'm... Alright, go west! Her goal is India, far to the west. It may be a difficult journey, full of hardships, but with the power of Buddha at her side, nothing can stop her. Crossing fields, mountains, and valleys, off she goes on her journey. Nice. There's a servant in there, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I don't really care. So, Bai Long, this is the dragon, right? Who the dragon, the prince of the sun, the prince who's the son of the Dragon King, basically acts as their like pack horse, which is a little funny in the story. A beautiful white horse. Once it was a dragon, but it changed its form to become the steed of a noble monk. It is said that it's the child of the dragon kings of the four seas. It carries the blood of the Dragon King, who rules all water in its veins, and has powers beyond human comprehension. The white horse travels with the priestess on her journey, just as it did in the past so many years ago and so far away. The protection of the four noble gods who defended Buddhism is with her, even if they have lost their shape. Nice. Pantao peach compote. Peach. Sometimes there are bad peaches out there, but this should be okay. I don't think eating this will give you a stomachache. Okay, good. There was no problem. I knew it would be delicious. I like how she did not know very clearly. Right. White cruising. I know her.
Yes, you do.
The sun shines upon the white deck, with the blue sky stretched out endlessly and the wind that refreshingly blows past. The saints from both the east and west smile brightly. Heroic Spirit Travel Journal. Kath Palug. Or, for our viewers' sake, Foo! Also, did you notice the little alcohol bottle here attached to her belt? 3rd anniversary travel outfit. Alright. Oh, also, travel journal from... Oh.
There's a voice
So
line.
this is the Kagen Falls. Avatamsa. Yep, truly a blessed waterfall.
華厳だなんてありがたい滝ね
So, Kegon Falls, Tochigi. Okay. So it's the same kanji with Avatamasa, which is the flower adornment representing becoming a Buddha. Okay. Prayer towards the night. Oh, Nita Chris! Aww. The light of wishes dyes the night sky, painting the entire world in a gentle glow. May this journey be full of warmth, such is the sentiment burning in this small flame. All right. Camelot lesson. Nope. That's a different character, CE, and it says her name. Oh, see, this one's another one on a real image. 6th anniversary. Base Camp Trail, Nepal. Oh, it's the Everest Base Camp in Nepal. Yeah. That makes sense. Dancing on lotus blossoms. Bloom magnificently of you who met a beautiful age. Like staves that dance freely, as well as ever-changing and thriving lotus. Where to lay my eyes before such beauty? No matter what we are capable of, this bedazzlement is inescapable.
Yeah, that is Xuanzang Sanzang.
I need more Monkey King. I need more Monkey King. I love this story so much, and I need more Monkey King. Fate, get on it. But it's a fun sermon. I like it. I was kind of reading through the little backstory for Sanzang as you were describing her, and I was like, it pretty much everything I said, like word for word about Journey to the West. It's a really good book. Y'all should read it, and go read Dragon Ball if you like it, or read Dragon Ball and then read Journey to the West. Love the Monkey King. So.
Yayo, yayo.
Yayo, dreaming, don't give it up, Luffy, dreaming, don't give it up, Zoro, dreaming, don't give it up, Nami, dreaming, don't give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up, here it goes!